Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we take a listener's question, a whole stack of sources, and really try to boil it down to the core insights.
Yeah, basically your shortcut to getting up to speed, maybe with a few surprises thrown in. You give us the topic, the materials, and we dive deep.
We try to make it, informative but not overwhelming. And today, oh boy, we're tackling a big one, a real historical puzzle.
Mm-hmm. The Voynich Manuscript, prompted by a listener's curiosity about these enduring mysteries.
And we've got some interesting stuff to work with, snippets from a Reader's Digest piece on unsolved mysteries, articles about the radiocarbon dating that's crucial, and then background info from Yale's Beinecke Library, and of course, Wikipedia.
So our mission today basically is to lay out the facts about this really weird manuscript. What does the science actually tell us, and what are all the different ideas people have about, what it is and why it exists?
Okay, let's get into it. So the Voynich Manuscript, what is it, fundamentally?
Well, at its heart, it's a book, an illustrated codex from the early 15th century, we think, and it's written entirely in this unknown script that nobody can read.
They even call the script Voynichese, right?
Mm-hmm.
After the guy who brought it back to light.
Exactly. Wilfrid Voynich, a rare book dealer, he acquired it, or rediscovered it, I guess, in 1912, so it's named after him.
But the book itself is much older, and now it lives at Yale.
That's right, at the Beinecke Rare Book and Manuscript Library. And interestingly, Yale actually put the entire manuscript online back in 2020, so you can actually go and look at every single page yourself.
Wow, okay, so physically, what are we talking about? How big is it?
It's got about 240 pages, give or take, made of vellum, animal skin parchment.
Calf skin, I think the sources said.
Calfskin, yeah. And there's evidence that some pages are actually missing, so it might have been even bigger originally.
And the text, this Voynich stuff, it goes left to right, like English.
Left to right, yeah. And some of the pages are unusual, too. They're fold-out sheets,
Mm.
bigger than the standard page size.
Okay, and the illustrations, I hear they're pretty out there.
Oh, they really are. They're fantastical is a good word. Kind of crudely drawn and colored in places. You see weird plants, like nothing identifiable. You see human figures, often nude women in strange settings, and lots of symbols that look, well, astronomical or astrological.
Okay, so you can't read it, the pictures are bizarre. How do we even know how old it is? I saw the Reader's Digest mention maybe Voynich himself faked it.
Ah, yeah, that was an early theory, but science kind of put that one to bed. Radiocarbon dating.
Right, C14 dating. How does that work again, briefly?
Well, basically, living things absorb carbon, including a radioactive type, carbon-14. When they die, they stop absorbing it, and the C14 starts to decay at a known rate. So by measuring how much is left in organic material, like the vellum parchment, you can figure out roughly when the organism died.
So they tested the Voynich parchment.
They did. University of Arizona, back in 2009, they took multiple samples from different pages, and the results were really consistent.
And the date was?
Came back firmly placing the vellum, the calf skin, between 1404 and 1438, so early 15th century. Definitely not a 20th century hoax by Voynich.
Okay, that's a solid piece of evidence then, a genuine medieval artifact.
Absolutely. And later tests, protein analysis in 2014, confirmed it was calf skin, and also, importantly, that it wasn't a palimpsest.
Meaning it hadn't been scraped clean and written over?
Exactly. It was fresh parchment when it was written on. And get this, they estimate it took the skins of at least 14 or 15 whole calves to make the book.
Wow. That's a lot of resources for back then. It must have been important to whoever made it.
You'd think so, yeah. It suggests a significant investment. Now, since we can't read the words, the main way researchers try to make sense of it is by looking at those weird illustrations. They've kind of divided the book into sections based on the pictures.
Makes sense. Sort of grouping by theme. What are the sections?
Well, the biggest one is usually called the herbal section, about 112 pages.
Herbal. Like plants.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Each page usually has one or two drawings of plants plus some text. But here's the kicker.
Let me guess. Nobody knows what the plants are.
You got it. Despite centuries of botanical knowledge, none of the plants in the Voynich manuscript have been unambiguously identified. They look like plants, but not quite like anything known.
That is wild. Okay, what's the next section?
Then you've got the astronomical section. About 21 pages. This one has lots of circular diagrams.
Like star charts?
Kind of. They definitely suggest astronomy or maybe astrology. You see drawings that look like suns, moons, stars. Even zodiac symbols, Pisces, Taurus, Sagittarius are mentioned as examples.
Okay, maybe some clues there.
Maybe, but it's still weird. Each zodiac diagram has these groups of around 30 small, partly nude female figures, often holding things that look like stars with labels.
Nude figures and zodiacs. Huh. Any idea why?
Nope, that's another puzzle. And it seems a couple of pages, maybe Aquarius and Capricorn, are missing from this section. Some pages are also those foldouts we mentioned.
Okay. Bizarre plants, weird astrology.
What else? Next up is balneological.
Balneo.
Right.
That's bathing, right? Like
Yeah.
spas.
Exactly, about 20 pages. Lots of text, but also drawings of, again, small nude women, sometimes wearing crowns, bathing in these pools or tubs connected by elaborate pipes.
Pipes, like plumbing, in the 15th century.
Looks like it. Intricate networks connecting the pools. There's even one bit where two facing pages seem to make one continuous design, like water flowing across the
That's
sprayle.
peculiar. What's after the bathing ladies?
Then there's a section called cosmological, shorter, maybe 13 pages. More circular diagrams, but these are even more obscure, really abstract patterns.
Like what?
Well, the most famous part is the Rosette's folio. It's this huge 6-page foldout. It looks, I don't know, almost like a map of imaginary islands or something. It shows 9 main rosettes or islands connected by causeways with little castles and maybe even a volcano depicted.
A fantasy map from the 1400s. Wow. Okay, two more sections.
Yep. Pharmaceutical, about 34 pages. This one has drawings of like isolated plant parts, roots, leaves, alongside objects that look a lot like apothecary jars, for storing herbs or medicines.
Ah, so maybe related to the herbal section?
Could be. Some illustrations here look like maybe rough sketches for the more finished drawings in the herbal part. And again, text accompanies the drawings.
And the last section, you called it recipes.
Yeah, that's the conventional name. About 22 pages. This section is almost all text, just solid blocks of Voyniches. But it's broken into short paragraphs, and each paragraph starts with a little star-like symbol in the margin.
Recipes.
hmm
But probably not for cooking.
Probably not, no. Could be instructions, procedures, maybe alchemical recipes, maybe medicinal preparations, we just don't know. But the stars suggest distinct entries or steps.
So we have this incredibly strange book from the 1400s. What do we know about who actually owned it over the centuries? Its provenance.
Ah, the history. It gets interesting and a bit murky, especially early on. The first owner we can definitely pin down with records is a guy named Georg Baresch,
When is he around?
17th century. He was an alchemist in Prague. But the book is clearly much older than that, based on the dating.
Right, so Paresh wasn't the first. Was there talk of earlier owners?
Yes. There's a really important letter from 1665 or 1666 written by Jan Mark Marcy. He was sending the manuscript to someone else, and in the letter he mentions that it was supposedly once owned by the Holy Roman Emperor Rudolf II.
Rudolphus II. He was known for being into alchemy and weird stuff, wasn't he?
Very much so. Based in Prague, collected curiosities. According to Marcy's letter, Rudolph believed the book was written by Roger Bacon.
The 13th century philosopher. But the dating.
Exactly. That's the problem. Bacon lived way too early for the parchment date, so either Rudolph was mistaken or Marcy's story wasn't quite right, or, well, it's a mismatch.
Did the letter say how much Rudolph paid?
It did. A whopping 600 gold ducats. A huge sum back then, if true, suggests he thought it was incredibly valuable.
Okay, so Rudolph maybe owned it. Who else? John Dee. I saw his name mentioned.
Yeah, the English astrologer and mathematician. He's another possible link. Marcy's letter suggests Rudolph might have bought it from Dee. Dee spent time in Bohemia at Rudolph's court.
And Dee was interested in codes and secret knowledge too, right?
Absolutely. He owned other Roger Bacon manuscripts. And intriguingly, Dee's son later wrote that his father owned a mysterious book containing nothing but hieroglyphics, which Dee studied intensely but couldn't understand. Could that have been the Voynich?
It certainly fits the description. A tantalizing possibility.
It really is. After Rudolph, the chain gets a little clearer. The Benecke Library mentions an inscription, Jacobi de Tepenis, visible under UV light. That might be Jacobus Horsicki de Tepenis, who was Rudolph's court pharmacist. Maybe Rudolph gave it to him.
Plausible.
Then it seems to have passed to Marcy, the guy who wrote the letter,
Yeah.
and Marcy sent it to Athanasius Kircher in Rome.
Kircher was like a polymath, right? Famous for trying to decipher Egyptian hieroglyphs, among other things.
Exactly. Marcy hoped Kircher, with his reputation, could crack the code. But apparently Kircher couldn't either, or at least we have no record of him succeeding.
So even the 17th century genius was stumped. Then what?
After Kircher, its whereabouts are a bit hazy for a couple of centuries. It eventually surfaced in the possession of the Jesuits in Italy. Then, in 1912, Wilfrid Voynich bought it from a Jesuit college near Rome.
And that's where it gets its modern name.
Yep. After Voynich died, his widow Ethel held onto it. Then it passed to her friend Anne Nill, who sold it to a rare book dealer named Hans Peter Krauss. And Krauss couldn't sell it for the price he wanted, so eventually, in 1969, he donated it to Yale.
Quite a journey. Always mysterious, always resisting being understood.
Pretty much sums it up.
Okay, let's talk about the text itself, this Voynich use. We know we can't read it, but what have linguists or cryptographers figured out about its structure? Wikipedia had some stats.
Yeah, they've done a lot of statistical analysis. I mean, you've got over 170,000 characters in total. That's a decent amount of text to work with.
And these characters form about 35,000 words. I'm using air quotes there.
Right, word-like units separated by spaces.
Hmm.
And within that, they found around 8,114 unique word shapes or types, which is interesting. It's not an infinite variety.
Does it seem random, or is there a pattern?
Definitely patterns. Certain characters seem to prefer appearing at the beginnings of words, others in the middle, others at the end. That suggests some kind of orthographic rules, like in real languages.
So it's not just alphabet soup.
Doesn't seem like it. Researchers have noted this regular structure, although one thing that's apparently missing or different is how grammatical markers work. In many languages, things like prefixes or suffixes clearly mark grammar, but in Voynichese, those kinds of patterns aren't so obvious, or they appear in the middle of words too, which is unusual.
Have they compared its statistics to known languages?
Oh yeah, lots of comparisons. Some studies found, for example, certain statistical similarities to Mandarin Chinese written in pinyin.
Really? Chinese?
Some specific measures, yeah, like character frequency distribution. But there were also significant differences, so it's not a straightforward match to anything.
What about word length?
Mostly short words, typically between 2 and 10 characters long. Another odd thing. The labels on the drawings almost never repeat. But in the main text, you can get the same common word appearing 2 or 3 times in a row.
And words that are almost the same, differing by just one letter, apparently show up quite often, too.
That's right. All these little structural quirks, people trying to crack it using statistical methods have often found it. Well, utter frustration was how one cryptanalyst put it.
I can imagine. But the statistics do suggest it's not just random nonsense.
Generally, yes. The overall statistical profile looks more like a natural language than just random symbols. It has features like word frequency distribution, how often common words appear, versus rare words that follow patterns seen in real languages. It seems to obey Zipf's law, for instance.
Zipf's law.
It's a statistical pattern where the most frequent word will appear about twice as often as the second most frequent, 3 times as often as the third, and so on. Most natural languages show this pattern, and Voynichese seems to too, which lends weight to the idea it carries meaning.
So if it looks like a language, but we can't read it, maybe it's a code, a cipher.
That was the assumption for most of the 20th century, but simple substitution where one symbol just equals one letter doesn't work. The letter frequencies don't match any known language.
What about more complex codes? Polyalphabetic ciphers.
Like the Vigenère cipher? People have looked into that too, but again, the statistical properties of Voynichese don't quite fit those models perfectly either. It's weirdly regular in some ways and irregular in others. Some have proposed a verbose cipher, where maybe single letters are expanded into groups of Voynich characters.
Okay, so maybe not a standard cipher. What about shorthand? Someone suggested Latin shorthand.
Yeah, Joseph Martin Feely back in the 40s. He thought it might be a personalized shorthand for Latin, maybe a scientific diary. But nobody's ever managed to produce a convincing translation based on that idea, so it hasn't really caught on.
And then there's steganography, hiding the message within the text rather than being the text.
Right, the idea that the real message is hidden maybe in the second letter of each word, or in tiny variations in the pen strokes, or something even more subtle. It's possible, but incredibly hard to prove or disprove. There are just too many possibilities for how you could hide information that way.
So if it's not a code, not shorthand, not steganography, could it just be a real lost language,
Yeah.
written in its own unique alphabet?
That's a very strong contender. As we said, the statistics resemble natural languages in many ways. The linguist Jacques Guise speculated about it being related to East Asian or Central Asian languages, maybe ones with lots of monosyllabic words written in an invented script.
And didn't you mention a recent study suggesting a link to an Indian script?
Yeah, a 2023 deep learning analysis pointed towards similarities with Kojeki, an old script used in parts of South Asia. It's just one analysis, but it shows people are still exploring these linguistic connections.
What about the Aztec connection, the Nahuatl theory?
Ah, yes, Tucker and Talbert's idea from 2013. They tried to identify some of the plants with species known from central Mexico, suggesting it originated in New Spain, and the text might be Nahuatl.
But didn't the dating contradict that?
That's the main problem. The vellum is early 15th century, well before Columbus and the Spanish conquest of the Aztecs, so the timeline doesn't really work. Plus, other experts on Nahuatl language and Mesoamerican plants have heavily criticized their specific interpretations. So, that theory is generally not widely accepted now.
Which brings us back to maybe it's all just a fake, an elaborate medieval hoax.
It's the elephant in the room, isn't it? After centuries of failure, you have to consider it. Gordon Rugg showed back in 2003 that you could generate text with some similar statistical properties using simple tools like lookup tables and a cardon grill, though the grill itself came later.
So you can make fake Voyniches.
He could make text that looked somewhat similar statistically, and another researcher, Andre Schinner, also argued the stats were more consistent with cleverly generated gibberish than a real language or cipher.
But didn't other analyses find evidence against the hoax idea? You mentioned semantic networks.
Exactly. Marcelo Montemuro's work in 2013 found patterns suggesting words related by topic appear closer together in the text than you'd expect by chance. That implies meaning. He argued it would be incredibly difficult, maybe impossible, for a medieval hoaxer to fake that level of subtle linguistic structure.
And the Yale researchers more recently.
Right. In 2021, using computational methods, they found that clusters of words identified by the computer seem to align pretty well with the different illustration sections, the herbal words clustered together, the astronomical words clustered together, and so on. Again, suggesting the text relates meaningfully to the pictures.
So the hoax theory is still debated. It's not settled.
Not at all. There's evidence pointing both ways.
And then there are all the other theories floating around online and in places like the Reader's Digest article. What were some of those?
Oh, all sorts. Some suggest a medieval gynecological handbook, maybe in medical shorthand. An alchemist's coded notebook is a classic theory. Someone proposed a Turkic language, though that raises questions about the drawings of people, given Islamic traditions about depicting figures.
Any other really unusual ones?
Well, there was the idea it was created just to occupy someone with mental health issues. Or even that it was automatic writing, maybe produced during migraines. It really shows how this thing sparks the imagination. People try to fit it into so many different boxes.
It really does. So, okay, we've gone through the history, the science, the structure, the theories. What's the big picture here? Where does that leave us?
It leaves us still puzzled, honestly. Despite all the work, all the technology, all the brain power thrown at it, the Voynich manuscript remains completely undeciphered. It's genuinely one of history's most persistent and baffling mysteries.
Yeah, we've looked at what it is physically. We know when it was made. That early 15th century date is key. We've seen this incredible range of theories, often contradicting each other, about who wrote it and why. And the meaning just stays locked away.
And that mystery is exactly why it keeps fascinating people, isn't it? The Reader's Digest piece touches on that allure of the unsolved. It's even inspired other artists and writers. Wikipedia mentions Luigi Serafini's Codex Serafinianus.
Oh yeah, that modern book that looks similarly bizarre and unreadable.
Exactly. A clear echo of the Voynich enigma. It's even inspired music, apparently. Its influence persists because the core puzzle persists.
So maybe a final thought for everyone listening. We have this object, definitely from the early 1400s. The text seems to have some kind of linguistic structure. It's not just random marks. What could it be? What kind of knowledge, what unique way of communicating might be hidden in there?
Is the answer a type of code we just haven't figured out yet? A language that simply disappeared without a trace? Or, could it be something even stranger, something we haven't even conceived of?
This deep dive has really just scraped the surface, I feel. The Voynich Manuscript. Well, it's still out there beckoning. Maybe one day someone will find the key.